Welcome to another episode of the Trusted Advisor podcast and video series powered by the Retail Solutions Provider Association. Our goal on the pod is to accelerate the success of today's and tomorrow's leaders in the retail IT industry. I'm Jim Roddy, back with you again. Thank you so much for joining us. In this episode, we'll discuss two topics: your sales pipeline and the retail IT channel timeline, with someone who's uniquely qualified to weigh in on both subjects. Joe Finizio has had sales and marketing leadership roles in the retail IT channel for over 40 years. You'll likely recognize some of these company names he's worked for: Data Terminal Systems, also known as DTS, Micros, Sharp, POS.com, Toast, and LINGA, which is an ISV he retired from earlier this year. Joe also spent nearly a decade leading two retail associations: POPAI, the Point of Purchase Association International, and he was president and CEO of the RSPA from 2006 to 2014. Joe Finizio, it is a pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Jim. I do have my RSPA hat on. This goes back to 2008. And I also have my Discover hat. It's a little beat up from yard work, but I have that. We got this at Inspire. Discover was our very first payment processor, or card brand member and sponsor back in 2008. And the reason I wore these is that period in time, 2008, was when the whole business model in our industry was shifting, and it plays right into what we're going to be talking about with sales pipeline management, and of course, the 75th anniversary of RSPA and how our association has endured. So get the hat, just
Awesome.
for you, Tim, just for you.
I appreciate it. I know I have one of those somewhere in my closet. It's actually a very comfortable hat as well, from the scholarship.
My Red Sox hat, by the way.
Well, and talk about that. So you live in the Carolinas now, but you're originally from Massachusetts. I'm curious, did I pronounce Sharp correctly, or is there a better way to pronounce it?
Sharp. And now you've got it, definitely. In Carolinas, you're down here now, so they do not say car, they say vehicle. So
and you've lived in the Carolinas for how many years now, Joe?
Almost 17.
All right.
And go ahead, Jim.
I can just say I haven't noticed you don't say y'all. It seems like everybody around here says y'all, except for maybe you and me.
I think myself and my family have been very lucky. Working for Micros, we live down in Maryland. Wonderful place to live, great place for children's education, and we absolutely love North Carolina and the Carolinas. The people are just spectacular. It's just a hidden gem of the slice of the world, and we're just lucky to be here. We're lucky to be. I was personally lucky to be in the industry for as long as I have been, and to work with some of the great people in the industry. Bob Collins and Murray Rubin, who started Data Terminal Systems, all the way up to the folks at Toast, that started that, and then also along the way work with a lot of great members at RSPA. To know the Clarence Wiggins of the world. Of course, BJ and Ann Maynard,
the Maynards,
and on and on. Lisa Falzone and Chris from Rebel, to be able to work with those folks. Steve Kuntz, Mike Bauer, we'll talk about a little later, and it's almost like a Forrest Gump type of life, and been lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time. And through that, if you get your eyes open, as Yogi Berra once said, you can observe an awful lot just by watching, and just keep your eyes open and learn and observe what's working, what's not working, and never stop learning. You can help business owners, for the independents of resellers, and also do your job for the companies that you work for.
Great. No, thanks for that. And again, you've seen it from, I'm glad you gave that additional background because you've seen this channel from a lot of different angles. And let's talk about, sales pipelines and the lead validation process. Because again, you've seen that from a
Sure.
vendor, the VAR, the ISV, the distributor from a neutral standpoint. Can you explain how sales pipelines and lead validation process and everything we're going to talk about under that, how that's so important about it's more managing your sales versus just how to sell and sales techniques?
Yeah. And I was just saying, I've worked with the reseller channel partners or dealers or bars. They've been called many things over the years, the majority of my career. But as the business model changed, wearing hats, back in 2007, when Jared, when it was United Bank Card, announced that they were going to give away Casio ECRs, and that the business model began to change. And it does, it evolves. And a quick story, I was standing, when I worked at Micros, Kay Branson and Digital Dining, they were Digital Dining,
Hmm.
they were one of our competitors. And when I went to work at RSPA, I had a chance to, meet Kay and talk to her as a member. And Kay had a great perspective of the marketplace. We were sitting in the back one time of one of the general sessions, and one of the speakers, I think it was in 2010, had big word up. Remember, Jim, you've got to remember this back. The big words up on the screen: change is coming. Change is, that was the big catchphrase back then. And Kate turned to me. She goes, "Well, they're wrong. In our business, if you think about our business, change has been a constant, and it's always changing, and it's always evolving. And how do you keep up with it? How do you work with it? And that's a constant learning, point that I brought up a minute ago. And that, so as the industry was evolving and the business model was evolving, lead generation and lead nurturing became very important. It became very expensive to get the business and to close the business, from that lead generation and nurturing to free hardware. If you think about it today, to close a deal, sometimes you have to give away free hardware, free software, free installation, free support, if you get the merchant ID. So how do you work in this environment? One of the items that I've seen missing is, how do you manage your pipeline? There's a gazillion books out on how do you sell. Although it goes way back, to the Xerox method, to all the way up to the Challenger sale and on from there. But this is not what pipeline management is. It's how do you maximize your lead? And sales pipeline management really provides the data, the visibility, and the methodology to maximize that lead conversion, because it costs so much to get that lead today, and to nurture that lead, how do you get the most out of it? How do you squeeze the juice out of that? So I don't want to be that guy that preaches about, I got a great idea, this is how you should sell, this is how you should run your business. I don't want to preach about it. It works. I've seen it work. At POS.com, we were in lead generation, lead nurturing business. And we had companies like Touch Bistro, like Pacera, et cetera, and others that were buying leads from us, and we were watching how they were nurturing them, and they were data driven. Toast, when I had my time there, very data driven. It works. So we're going to talk about that a little bit, and at a very high level, because there's a lot to it, but it's not complex, if that makes sense. You just got to do it. And because the CRM systems out there, use free HubSpot, to Zoho, to Salesforce, et cetera, out there that can do all this and provide you with the reports and the information. It makes it easy. You just got to do it.
Yes. Yeah. And you talked about leads, and right, everybody, you asked, do you want more leads? And whether they're a VAR, an ISV, a vendor, they're like, of course, more leads, more
Yeah.
leads. And so I know we're going to talk a little bit more about the mechanics of handling and managing those leads. Can you talk about the importance of making the most of what you have versus just being in that constant, lead mining, mode?
Yeah.
Do you think it's more important to have, I'll just use round numbers here, is it more important to really nurture well 25 leads as opposed to just go out and get 200 and throw a bunch of stuff at them and see what
I,
works? Is the quality more important than the volume?
no, it doesn't really matter. It matters, is the lead working or not for you? Uh, if you could have a really high quality lead, quote unquote, but if it's not working, if you can't get to the right people, uh, if the salesperson isn't even calling them, it's not, so you have to manage that lead, whether it's a good lead or a bad lead. If it's a bad lead, you're going to figure it out real quick. If it's a good lead, if you're managing it right, if you're managing your pipeline, you'll know that you're not talking to the right person. And that, the points to remember is that, for data-driven sales management, managing a pipeline, it will maximize your lead conversion, just what you were talking about, thus your return on investment. It's going to increase your sales activity visibility. Are you talking to the right person? What mode are they in? They just bought a system. They're not going to be in buying mode. They're going to be in complacent mode. And it'll also maximize your sales team time. What I found at the last place I was working at is that we were wasting a lot of salespeople time. So how could we maximize that? By working with, back to your point, leads that we can convert to business. And whether it was in today's world, whether it's a kiosk, a food kiosk, so you can get the mid, to a 12 station, a restaurant with 12 wait stations at it and 20 handhelds. It maximize that time and convert those leads. Don't waste time on leads that aren't being converted. And here's a question for the sales managers out there. Did you ever give a salesperson a great lead and then talk to them in next week's sales meeting and find out that lead has not been contacted? If you're managing the pipeline, that will not happen, and you can convert them.
Yeah, organization I used to work for, if you didn't call somebody within a week, they would go and say, well, apparently you're not interested in reaching out to them, and they would go and give it to somebody else. And that kind of, I don't say guaranteed, but it made the chance of people reaching out and calling that lead a lot higher once they realized there was a penalty for
it. And guess what? In today's marketplace, they've had 5 to 10 that prospect, that opportunity has had 5 to 10 other companies call them. A couple of years ago, I was working for another company, and my daughter and son-in-law had a restaurant. So I went as a restaurant to the NRA show, looking at tablet companies, and that because we were going to come out with an iPad-based system. And my daughter finally called me up. She said, "What have you done?" She said, "I'm getting calls all day long, and they're calling during lunch."
Yeah.
That goes back to sales management, and that. So you've got to be quick. You've got to be responsive. You've got to, ask the right questions. Plus, you've got to have good product as well. Good product and good support, and that. You need to properly address the leads. You got to, and this data-driven information is going to help the salesperson with their visibility. It's going to help the sales management, and it's also going to help the ownership. One thing that we found at the company that starts with T, when we brought this methodology that works so great for the direct sales force to the reseller channel, the ownership, resale ownership said, "Oh my God, I didn't know that these leads weren't being addressed. I didn't know that we were not getting a good conversion on buyer zone leads." Those types of things, will help you manage a business better and get better return on investment.
Yeah. Great. So let's dive into some of those mechanics. So there's two
Sure.
topics that we'll kind of sort them into. One is qualifying leads. The other one is the pipeline itself. Which one do
Yeah.
you want to address first, qualifying or the pipeline?
Let me set the stage up.
Yeah,
You know, we're working in one industry. There's no POS industry. There's no payments industry today. In that,
it's true.
back in 2012 RSPA journal session, I had a slide where two cars were crashing into each other, and the two people in the cars were outside swapping papers. And I said, well, it was a guy and a gal, and I said they're either swapping insurance papers or they're going to be swapping phone numbers for a date. What I didn't realize is that the one industry was buying the other industry. That was really, they were saying, hey, I'll give you so much money, I'll buy your industry. And that's what's happened. The payments industry has bought the POS industry, if you really think about it. You've got Shift4 that's bought a number of ISVs, and you've got Heartland/Global that's bought a number of ISVs as well. And even Shift4 is buying a number of resellers. In fact, to increase their portfolio or whatever, for whatever business reasons. That's not here or there. So you got to think of it as one, how do you sell in this industry? How do you sell when the product's free? Is free POS just the front end, or is a suite of software? And then you bring in the whole cash discounting. I know there's a podcast coming that's out right now on that. Cash discounting is another way of transitioning the cost of payment processing itself. So how do you maximize your business in doing that? And like I said, there's companies that have figured this out. Toast is doing almost $1 billion a quarter in that. And Micros eventually got up to close to $2 billion in that, and that was a long run with hardware and software to get there. So going back to the pipe, how do you work in that environment? So everybody needs qualified leads. Everybody needs to have a lead that is real. I was talking to a reseller, and they said, yeah, I've got all these leads. And I said, have you qualified them? They said, I know, I get a bunch of names. Well, that's really a list. That's a contact list.
Yes.
It's not qualified. Okay, so there's multiple lead sources out there. I mentioned Buyer's Own, but the cost to generate your own leads is significant. There's other resources out there that go and search the web and bring you prospects. It'll say, okay, we got these names off these restaurant websites, and here's your contacts. That's not really a lead. That's and then there's also software out there that will look at who's doing what searches and say, okay, these contacts here are folks that have been doing searches for point of sale. So that's a little bit better, but you really need to qualify all these. So
and can you dive into, like, how does somebody, what do you see as a best practice for qualifying a lead? Like, is it simply hopping on the phone and asking them a few questions? Is it researching their website? Is it visiting them? Is it all of the above, none of the above? What is the best practice for qualifying a lead?
So here's the first step. If you got all these contacts, this is what I was getting to. If you have all these contacts and that, you've got to get to them quickly. That's the first thing. If you get a lead from Buyer's Own or MVF or anybody else that's creating leads for you, there's this magic window of 5 minutes. Lead comes in, contact them within 5 minutes. You're not a 24-hour machine, so have something on your website where you can automatically, I don't want to keep talking about HubSpot, but there's other marketing automation softwares out there where if somebody goes to your page to get information, you can quickly get information back to them in that. So at least they have a touch. Or if you have a sales development rep, we used, and other companies use sales development reps. So if a lead comes in, somebody's hit the website, somebody's come to a trade show. Here's a trade shows list every day. Here's the people that came to our booth. Bang, the sales development rep, the SDR, is contacting them. So they immediately have a contact with them. And then, also the traditional down the street, pull the doorknob. That's a great way of making that instant contact. There was a sales rep down in Tampa. He was selling 150 restaurants a year, onesies and twosies, because he was walking down the street, pulling doorknobs. And so he knew his territory. However, the magic here is contact the lead immediately and qualify him and have some questions, and, determine, are they shopping or are they buying? Are they a market qualified lead or are they a sales qualified lead? And, different businesses have different questions that you can ask for that. And you script it out. It's real easy and do it quick. Ask 2 or 3 questions and then bang, are they qualified? We would get calls. We'd get leads late at night sometimes from a bartender that's had a rough day. And this system is terrible. Man, I need a new system. Well, let's contact. They're not going to be the buyer. Then one of the questions in the qualifying is, are you the person that's going to be making the buying decision? So are you talking to the decision maker within the economic buyer within that? So that's a good way of call. Quick and short and sweet with the questions, but qualifying quick, because you don't want to get your sales staff unqualified leads, because that wastes their time.
Yes, and so thank you for that. It almost reminds me of, I can't remember if this is an RSPA meeting or if it was, an education session, but it was leads. You should view them as ice cubes, right? You put an ice cube out on the counter. You can't be like, I'll get to that in a little bit. Like, you better get to it right away, or else you're going to have water on your counter and all over your floor. So it sounds like that's what you're saying. You need to have a lead qualifying process, but it's more important the speed at which you execute whatever your process is versus refining it. Like, make sure you're connecting with those folks pronto.
Yeah, great analogy, Jim. I like the ice cube one. I never used it, but I'll steal it.
I stole it from somebody else. I can't remember exactly who it was, but
yeah.
Yeah. What else would you say about qualifying leads before we talk about, once a lead is in, managing the pipeline itself? Anything else you want to say on qualifying leads, or you want to talk pipeline?
No, I actually, one other thing. It's really important that you get the information in the CRM, and that's really important. And then as you're going through the sales cycle, you'll want to know the quality of the leads. We'll go back to your quality question. What's going into the top of the funnel or the start of the pipeline is really a quality. Are you getting, at one of the places, we were getting a boatload of leads. We were getting a lot of leads from Facebook, but they were not good at all. So, the quantity was good, but the quality wasn't good. But we were able to cut that off at the top of the pipeline with our qualifications questions. So we were able to, with that data, knowing what our conversion ratio, and we're going to talk about that. What's your lead to qualified lead conversion ratio? We found out that the Facebook leads for us, and that was not very good at all. So the money that we spent, even though it was cheap to get a Facebook lead, was probably better spent based upon the time that we spent qualifying or finding out they were not qualified. So you can do a lot of work with the conversion ratio of leads to qualified leads. So that's very important up in the in the initial qualification portion of this process. And that's first point. Second point there is put the data in the CRM, because if it's now if it's an unqualified lead, put them into a drip campaign, because at some point that company that just bought the system, they may not like it, or down the road they may expand and need something that goes beyond the capability of the system. If they bought the cheapest system out there, it probably didn't have all the features. They might need something beyond that.
Great. Yeah. No, I appreciate you spelling it out that way, in terms of, like, you and I have talked sports in the past as well. And a lot of times a recruit, why did you go with that college? They called me first, and then they stayed in touch with me. So I know that they cared. So even if you don't have necessarily the best product or the best fit, getting in there first and having that relentless follow-up instead of, they haven't bought in 6 weeks, I'm going to forget about them. That's how sales are made
Right.
over time. And I guess so that could be a good segue into talking about the pipeline itself, right? Because all
Mhm.
these, as any VAR ISV listening to us right now knows, and you know well, Joe, it's rarely one call business where a person says, that's a
Right.
wonderful system, I'll take two. So can you talk about managing that pipeline?
Right.
Again, speaking to the sales managers, speaking to the sales leaders, the sales teams, how do you manage that? Where do you think we should start this conversation?
Sure. Okay. We're going to go by segment, by the salesperson and the sales manager, and then, and then into the methodology and how with the salesperson to the sales manager to the ownership and how it will help. And that. So again, guys, this is just a primer on it. To do this, there's a good methodology to this that, but the whole point of this is to get you thinking about this, that if this is something you should be thinking about implementing in your business. And that, okay, so now you've got a qualified lead, you got a prospect, you got an opportunity, whatever you want to call it, on your list. Okay. And as a sales managers out there, have you ever seen a lead be on that prospect list forever? This has been on here now for 8 weeks. What the heck is going on? Have you called them? How often do you call them? Those types of things. And that, it's on the close. You were going to close this 4 weeks ago. You said you were going to close it. What's going on? This is where the methodology will help. If you sit down with that salesperson every week, and sit down with them for an hour, take an hour to go over their pipeline. Did you contact these leads? Well, this lead was going to close last week. Why didn't it close? Okay, they had a construction delay, understand. Have you contacted them this week? Construction delays allow other competitors to get in if they weren't in there yet. Make sure you're in contact with them. So you can have these kind of conversations, coaching, mentoring conversations. This weekly conversation with each salesperson individually, not as a group, but individually, is not an opportunity to beat the dickens out of your salesperson. It's an opportunity for a really good sales manager to mentor, to teach, and to coach that salesperson. And I can tell you firsthand, we implemented this with salespeople from resellers and also direct sales staff. The folks that it connects to really appreciate that mentoring. I've just had a lot of great feedback from folks from salespeople on that.
And Joe, can I just ask, so like you talking about this weekly and at a minimum weekly conversation,
Yeah.
just reminds me of the aphorism, right? There's no substitute for a competent manager getting closer to a situation. So it's hard to be prescriptive about what exactly would go on in that one-on-one meeting, but it's the opportunity for you to teach whatever way it is, right? In terms of how they're engaging, the frequency with if they're engaging, as opposed to if you just have, you better hit your quarterly numbers, all the managers viewed as is the person who's going to go in and be like, are you making your numbers? Are you making your numbers? Like, that's not helping. That's just almost berating. Am I understanding that correctly? Like, that's
Correct.
the
Yeah.
value of this weekly one-on-one.
Right. Yeah. And also you're coaching them, a couple of things I always ask is, okay, you definitely have to focus on your number. If you're supposed to close 5 deals, get 5 new customers each month, you've got to know what your closing ratios are. Okay. If I put out a quote, what percentage of those do I close? And I'll get to that in a second in that, but the other point is that if you make sure that they're talking to the right people. So you got to here's a chance to coach on buying personas. Are you talking to the user buyer? Are you talking to the manager that doesn't have, that has a say in how the day-to-day runs, how the floor runs, in that, but doesn't have a say in what's being purchased. User buyer, you're talking about some companies have technical buyers. If it's a larger company, they might want, okay, I want cloud-based. I don't want iPad-based. I want, I want an Android-based, built for purpose, your terminal. That's your technical buyer, and then your economic buyer. So you got to know who you're talking to. So one thing I always did is who you're talking to, and have you asked them? Are they the decision maker? Where do they and are you answering all these questions? It could be one person, or it could be a committee, but you got to make sure you're doing that. And then what buying mode are they in? Are they in growth mode? That's somebody. I mean, growth mode. We're going to add on, add on to the initial, merchant, or we're going to add on more locations. They're in trouble. My system just blew up. I need another system. Or they're complacent. And if they're, and here's where this goes back to one of the initial things that you were saying, and we were talking about, it could be a good lead, but if they just bought something or the business is flying and they really don't care, they're making a lot of money, they could be in complacent mode, and you're going to waste a lot of time on a good opportunity there. They could have shop cash registers that they got at Costco, and they could really use handhelds for their patio and et cetera, because you're looking at it going, my God, they're bleeding.
Right.
I remember going up to a restaurant in Maine one time. It was right on the coast, and it was one of these summertime seafood restaurants. And one of the cars, it was a BMW in the parking lot, and the license plate was B Tender. And we went in and talked to the owner, and the owner had, ECRs, electronic cash registers. And we said, you really need a system? He said, no, I don't need it. That's complacent mode. Well, a few years later, that bartender owned the system, owned the company, and by the way, he ended up buying, the B Tender ended up buying. Yeah. So, complacent mode, you're not going to sell, but you got to know who you're selling to, and you got to know the buying modes. I'm getting a little bit into sales methodology, but I don't want to do that. But that's the coaching that you can do to the individuals and that. And then you got to understand, where are you in the sales process? That's the other part of the coaching. Are you just approaching? Have you done your survey of this customer? Do you know exactly what they're looking for? They have a patio. Have you talked to them about handheld units? Pay at the table, buy at the table. They don't have a lot of money. Have you talked to them about cash discounting? Those types of things when you're talking about the survey. And then you've got to know the conversion rates in that. Okay, I got a lead. Every lead that comes in, I convert 10% of those leads. So I've got to have a lot of leads coming in that I need to address. How many do I need to address each week? How many, and you can put this in the salesperson can put it in the CRM in their tasks. I need to call these leads today. I need to contact them. I need to follow up. And then also I need to understand on a weekly basis with my sales manager, is it still a work in process? Or do we have to re-nurture that lead? Do we need to put him into a drip campaign? Or do we need to do other things? Do I need to, find out if, am I talking to the right person? So the conversion numbers that are important, this is the data-driven part, are lead to sale conversion. How many demos do I need to do to get a sale? Quote to sale. I'll get this many quotes out. What percentage go to sale? And then those are the important ones. Lead to sale, demo to sale, close sale, and quote to sale. There's some other stuff, like lead to how many leads, so I need to get to a demo and that. But if you're tracking those three, you have a good handle on it. So to go back with the salesperson, weekly one-on-one. I'll get to a general meeting in a second. Weekly one-on-one, coach and mentor. Find out some quick questions to ask is, what's the buying persona you're dealing with, and what's their buying mode, and what do you need to do to move them to the next step in the sales process.
Yeah, this isn't happenstance. Not that it's all science, but there's definitely a methodology to it as
Right.
well. You have
Oh
to have
yeah.
a plan in order to do that. So,
Mhm.
Joe, we have about 15 or so minutes left, and I
Yeah.
know we want to talk about the retail IT channel timeline as well. Before we take a commercial break, what else would you say about sales pipeline? What other
Yeah.
advice would you have for our
Yeah.
listeners?
Yeah. Management methodology, really quick, in that you know the sales manager needs to have have the one-on-one, but then also um, for this, what's really good is to have a 15-minute stand up with the team. Can be on the phone. If you have a direct team, that's easy. If you have folks out in the field, it's not. But who are you going to close today, and any obstacles, real quick. Not going to close anybody, that's okay. But at least it gets your sales staff thinking about it. And so when you do have your one-on-one, you find out about that. So the guidance and mentorship that can provide, I right person, manager, I in the buying mode, what obstacles, or a good friend of mine, John Tater, calls them opportunities. If there's an obstacle, it's an opportunity to do something. It's an opportunity. Find out if you're addressing all the pain points. What are the next steps to get, and the timetable to get to that next step, and add those to your CRM, and then review the conversion numbers. In that, the example is if you're closing 50% of your quotes, and you need to close 5 per month, you better have 10 quotes out in that. So, and then it goes back to, if you're not getting enough leads in your pipeline based upon your conversion rate, then in fact you've got to, that's a management issue that they have to get to.
Right.
So there's a lot more to that. So you want me to wrap the pipeline thing up right now?
If you could. Yeah, if you could, that'd be great.
So, guys, this is what successful companies are doing to maximize the business. One thing this will do is it's going to provide visibility for your sales staff. They'll know the conversion rates. They'll know if you put, again, HubSpot has this free CRM, and you can put it in what they call a Kanban view, so you can see what leads are in each section of the sales pipeline, and you'll know what needs to be done to move it to the next, from a qualified to a survey, from a survey to a demo, from a demo to a quote to close, that type of thing. So those lead conversion rates are important, and you've got to have the data to do this. Might sound like a lot of work, but it's not. The CRM helps. The conversion rates, once you get those, it really adds to the conversation with your sales team, and the visibility ensures that you have fast response and proper response to actions. You're not just guessing at it. Oh, we got to lower the price. Oh, we've got to,
Yes.
we've got to have a special. Why do you have to have
you'll have more data to make a decision on.
Yeah. And you get a chance to manage your ROI. We found out at one of the companies that for every lead that we were getting from a company, we were spending more for the lead than we were making on the sale, because we weren't converting correctly. So pipeline management, data-driven sales management, it's really good. Think about it.
No, Joe, I appreciate that, because again, there's a lot of my old basketball coach used to say, a lot of energy with little or no productivity. And oftentimes there's all sorts of energy in working and sales and doing all sorts of different things. But this methodology is going to help VARs and ISVs get a higher percent of sales. And speaking of sales, go ahead, Joe.
I was going to say, the validation of that is we brought this to a bunch of resellers, and it just really worked. It worked for the resellers. It worked for my direct team at LINGA as well, my LINGA, and it just brought a whole new light for that. So back to you.
Yeah, you're right. It's not a theory. It's actually been
Right.
put into practice. And
Right.
as I was saying, speaking of sales, let's pause here to let our listeners and viewers know about the Retail Solution Providers Association. The RSPA is North America's largest community of VARs, software developers, vendors, and distributors in the retail, restaurant, grocery, and cannabis verticals. Upcoming registration is now open for Retail Now 2023, hosted by the RSPA. It's the Retail IT Channel's #1 trade show, education conference, and networking event. This year's event is set for July 30th through August 1st at the Gaylord Palms in Orlando. You can find out more by visiting gorspa.org/retail now. And to receive the benefits of an RSPA membership or to become an RSPA sponsor, you can email membership@gorspa.org. All right, Joe.
Join
So,
today.
so
Doing my
let's let's talk about our industry in general, and then in particular about the RSPA, which, as you mentioned earlier, it's celebrating 75 years in 2023. Talk to us. When was the first time you engaged with the RSPA, or was it the ICRDA, the Independent Cash Register Dealer Association, or the SDA, the Systems Dealer Association? Those two merged to form the RSPA in 2003. Can you talk about your first engagement with the association?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it goes a long time ago. Hate to say it. That's why I have a hat on, so you can't see the gray hair. And when I started, then I had hair where I wanted it, and it was dark. And that this goes back to data terminal systems, and we would go as a sponsor to the ICRDA, Independent Cash Register Dealer Association, and this goes back to my Forrest Gump conversation, that I was lucky enough to, stand and have the opportunity to talk to some of the founders, this Stanley Heyman, Lenny Weintraub, Ed Mancini, Kurt Kennington, and learn from these folks. And that's one thing that, RSPA is very good at, is making those connections and providing the education. And as Mark Olson said, leveraging the collective IQ of the industry and bringing that, and having an opportunity as a kid in my early 20s to stand with these folks and to learn from them, was tremendous. That goes back to the ICRDA, and then the DTSDA, Data Terminal Systems Dealers Association, which was the foundation for the System Dealers Association. It was, if you go back through the industry, ICRDA was founded back in 1948 on the premise that these dealers, these folks that they came back from World War II, and they started their own businesses, and they were fixing and selling cash registers, and they needed to buy parts from NCR. And NCR wouldn't do it. They sued NCR, brought it to the Supreme Court, and they won. And now they had the Parts Center. The Parts Center was in Dayton originally, and then they ran out of space and they moved it to Charlotte because Kurt Kennington had space in his building for that. The ICRDA grew and on the premise of protecting the dealers from the vendor. It was vendor, NCR, and then the vendors. Then in the 70s, DTS started in 1970, and the transition from mechanical to electronic started. I happen to live in Maynard, Massachusetts, where the very first electronic point of sale system, or electronic computer cash register, was installed at the paper store in Maynard, Massachusetts. And with Bob Collins and Murray Rubin, they started then. And so ICRDA was mechanical guys, mechanical guys, and the DTSDA was the system guys, and then SWEDA came along, and then tech came along with electronic, and it grew. The story behind the transition between DTSDA and SDA was, DTS was bought by National Semiconductor. National Semiconductor Data Checker said, "Oh, we're going to take all your major account business, the Safeways and all that the DTS dealers had." And at a annual meeting with the dealers, they walked out. And
really,
it was cool. And
stressful for some of the time, but cool for others. Yes.
And then they, they said, okay, we're not going to call ourselves DTSDA anymore because it was Data Checker, National Semiconductor Data Checker, DTS. We're going to be the System Dealers Association. And, Bob Goldberg, the association's former attorney, and Bob was very much involved in that. In fact, they went up to Chicago, where Bob's based. John Lockington was involved. John's, I believe, a member of the Industry
Hall of Famer. Yep.
Right. And so, I just happened to be just lucky enough to be there for watching what's going on. And you could see, the ebb and flow between ICRDA and SDA. And then as the mechanical guys retired, the folks like Mark Carroll that took over his dad's business, David and Howard McCarthy, on and on, those folks, they were involved in the SDA and the ICRDA. And, because, there was an equal balance between them. And they said, why are we doing this? Why don't we bring both together? And, David Zaletti was involved in that. David Ashley. There's so many really good people in the business.
And they learned to cooperate. And it was called for a while the RCRDA/SDA. Then they ended up forming the RSPA. And then in 2006, when you came on board full time, that was a time only the POS dealers could be members and vendors could only be sponsors. But the dealers ended up that year, I believe, voting to grow beyond a dealer association and establish an industry association. And now looking back 17 years ago, I can't believe it was that long, right? When you look in the rearview mirror, it's like, well, of course, that seems like a great idea, but it was contentious back then. I was at the meeting in Jamaica in January or February of 2006, and there was some raised voices. I'll just say that. Can you talk about what did you experience? What was the RSPA like? What was the industry like when you came on board in 2006?
Sure. And so this is why I brought up that the whole Supreme Court and the lawsuit and that, because you had a group of folks that, it took a lot of work and a lot of tenacity for that group of folks to bring a lawsuit all the way up to the Supreme Court. So there was this concern about, the vendor dealer thing going on. And that was starting to fade away. In 1984, IBM came out with the first open platform system. And proprietary systems began to go to open platform. So vendors and dealers started to need each other to collaborate, and they had folks doing some really great things with these open platform systems on the reseller side, the reseller dealer side, and that. But there still was that contentious relationship between the two. And I remember I was running the reseller channel at Micros, and I didn't get ICRDA. I said, we are a sponsor. We go to the show, but we compete with them. And because the bulk of the ICRDA was PC4, Parts Center 4, which was the original reason that they started the organization. So that says we have 5 minutes left. Do I need to talk fast, Jim?
No, you go ahead. You can keep going.
Okay. Was the original reason for the ICRDA to be formed. And we were competing with supporting a competitor, and I didn't get it, and many other people didn't get it. And that was, Mike Bauer and Mark Olson, and I'm sure others.
Mike from ScanSource, Mark Olson, APG Cash Drawer.
Yeah, exactly. And now they brought this idea to that meeting in was it Jamaica or was it in Jacksonville?
So there was a meeting, I believe, in Jacksonville in the winter of 2005, because that's how I ended up getting involved, because somebody from Business Solutions Magazine was there, but they were moving over to focus on different technologies, and that's how I ended up getting involved. So that's how I know it was, must have been, Jacksonville, winter of 2006, or winter of 2005, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was that one. And then, So that got the idea going. Now we get to another group of folks that had the tenacity and the vision, and that was the board of the of the now RSPA, the Consolidated SDA, in that, and that was Howie Aiken, Bob Bauer, Steve Kramer, and David McCarthy. And this was a situation where they were going to break what the organization had been built upon. And this is why I brought this up at the beginning, that there's constant evolution. For something to continue to grow and be successful and evolve, you need to evolve with the business. Okay, and this is what the ICRDA did, the SDA did, RSPA is doing, and they're evolving to this point. So, Howie, Steve, David, and Bob, they made some brave decisions to go ahead with this, as a board and as the officers and the board, to go ahead with this. And I was lucky enough to, get the job to, be able to run it. So we had to do with Dave McCarthy and Bob Goldberg did a great job. We working on the bylaws, which had to be changed. And then we had to bring it up to the dealer meeting at back then it was called Focus Advantage in 2006 at Reno, Nevada.
Yes.
Last time we've been to Reno was 2006. And a presentation was given and there was some consternation. I'll bring this up because I want to come back to this. I know Paul Roth from Roth Cash Register was very vocal. Paul was one of the original folks. Paul's in the Hall of Fame. Paul was one of the original ICRDA people, so he knew what was the principles it was founded upon, and he spoke up. Later on, Paul spoke at one of the RSPA conventions, and he said that he couldn't believe how successful working the collaboration between the dealer / reseller and vendor community could be for his business. So, I love Paul for doing that. I loved Paul anyways. What a great man. And just to see that and how that, those are brave decisions that the board made and brave decisions that the membership made, and that to completely change the business model of the association.
Because they could have stayed stuck to the past. And my old boss used to say there's no room in business decisions for nostalgia, right? You can get nostalgia and just talk and walk down memory lane, but just because something worked 20 years ago or 30 years ago doesn't mean like, well, I guess we have to keep following this model. And definitely those folks did that. Can I ask you, looking back now, how gratifying is it for you to see, again, because you were on the front lines when it was uncharted territory, right? Yeah. There were people who were saying, I remember people having conversations like, well, if this doesn't work, then what? Right? Because the jury was still out on it. And so how do you feel now that the industry and the channel and the RSPA are so healthy today? Of course, any industry, has bumps and warts, but there's definitely been significant growth, momentum, and there's, like you said, that camaraderie, a natural camaraderie among members. We don't have to force a vendor working group anymore to have the vendors feel included. They're just naturally included. How does that make you feel knowing that those outcomes were far from guaranteed back in 2006 when you were on the front lines?
I want to give a shout out to some people. First of all, in that, and then talk to you about some of the things that we had to do, because you're right, it wasn't a given, and it could have fallen on its face very quickly, and that it was again the board, those volunteers, the volunteer board, they don't get paid for it, and the officers providing leadership. We used to tease Dave McCarthy. We said, you've been doing this, volunteering for so long that you didn't get a term, you got a life sentence on that. But there was a lot of hard work that went into that. Also, the vendors that came on and supported it. We wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for ScanSource and Epson, because at one point we were looking at, we had to sell off PC4. I'll get to that in a second. And we didn't have any cash flow. So we needed sponsorships. Vendors sponsored like crazy, but we needed more. And we came up, had this idea about the super sponsorship. This is, that reactive thing that I was telling you about with, said, got this great idea. And had got this great idea. We'll come with the super sponsorship. Let's see if we can sell this. And ScanSource stepped up with a lot of money. And then Epson stepped up with a lot of money. In fact, we went out, Bob Bauer and I went out to see Epson. Bob had just had shoulder surgery, and he's out there in the sling, just on a plane, going cross country. And we made a presentation to Epson, and those two sponsorships gave us the cash flow so we could get through that first year, because we had to sell. Another brave decision was we had PC4, we had to sell it because it was not a viable business. And I'll give a shout out to Dean Crotty. Dean was the chairman of the board at that point. Big decision. The organization was founded on parts, buying parts from NCR. In fact, when we sold PC4, we still had shells from 1948 with parts from 1948.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately we had to sell that off. And because we had that cash flow and because we had the vendors supporting the organization, we were bringing on a lot of members. Ultimately, we tripled membership and also doubled the size of the show. Then the other thing, Jim, that was really important, we had to have relevance for the organization.
Yeah.
And lucky enough, at that point, PCI came along. And the other shout out that I want to do is to give it to the RSPA team. When I joined, there were 3 people in RSPA. There was myself, Amy Everett. Amy did the trade shows, and then Casey. Casey had just joined. Casey,
it
Lofton.
was Weimer at that time. Yeah, Casey Lofton. Yeah.
Casey Lofton was the graphics person. She had started like a week before me, and that was it. And the rest, everybody else was PC4. So how do you build something? So we started to build up, and we had a person to do marketing communications. Nicole Taylor joined. She was a reporter for the local NBC station. Nicole, Casey, Amy Hansel came on board. Amy did our events. Mary Rudier did our administration, kept everything together. Jay Usick came on board to put together an education program for us. And I'll give a shout out to Betty. Betty, I can't remember her last name. She was our bookkeeper, and she kept the wheels on the truck as it was falling apart. So initially, we did a video on Are You at Risk? If you ever want to see it, it's still on YouTube. And one of our members had got involved in a lawsuit with a breach. Bob Goldberg recommended that we do a video. Nicole had just started. I said, Nicole, great opportunity for a piece to go out. And we did this Are You at Risk to show what can happen if you're not following PCI SSE, Payment Card Industry Security Standards Council's security standards, and how you need to make sure that your customers are secure. Quick story, and I'll stop. I was at a conference, NRA, National Restaurant Association conference for regional restaurateurs. We had about 50 CIOs in the room, and they invited the Secret Service there. We're down in New Orleans. So Secret Service that headed up the branch came in, and we're introducing ourselves. And I said, Joe Finizio, RSPA, and he goes, I know you. And said, that's not a good thing.
No.
And he said, we use your video. Anytime a restaurateur or a merchant is breached, they don't know what happened. So the Secret Service gets involved. U.S. Secret Service gets involved because they are in charge of protecting our monetary system. And The merchant doesn't know what happened. So we put him in a room, we put the DVD in, and we say, we'll see you in 12 minutes. And they come out and they know, okay, I know what happened. My data's been breached. I know what's going to happen, et cetera. And they go, oh my God. And that. So that work that we did, that relevance helped our members. And we had to do that, it cost a lot of money. We had support from vendors, Mercury, Data Cap, Mercury.
Mercury Payment Systems,
Mark and Jeff Katz and Tom Reichert, the work that they did, Barry Weiss at Epson, may Barry rest in peace, to bring all these pieces together and to support these things was just immense. And the team, the volunteers, the committees that we put together, you're driving the boat now. In that, and the committees and the volunteers are the fuel that run the organization.
Yep. And the
sorry, it's a long story, but you asked.
No, but they ascribe to the rising tide lifts all boats, people working together and make the channel better, not fighting over pie. And you mentioning all those sponsors just made me realize I don't think I said thanks to our sponsors today who support the RSPA community and make this podcast and video series possible. Our platinum sponsor is Blue Star. Gold sponsors are CoCard, Heartland, ScanSource, and Star Micronics. So, Joe, we are right up against time, but my final question for I do want to hear this. Looking back on your career and looking back on the association, what's like one lesson or one memory you want to share with our listeners today that you want them to take away?
Yeah. I'll go back to something I said earlier. Keep learning, keep adapting. This is where RSPA can definitely help. Again, the organization brings a collective IQ together. And you can learn from some unbelievable people in the industry. RSPA continues to grow and adapt. They represent our industry. The one unique thing that the Industry Association has and Jim has is that you have a view of the entire industry. You're not the bad guy. You're not a competitor calling up. You can pick up the phone and talk to any vendor in our business, and that's a unique opportunity. That's the thing that I enjoyed the most. I get to, and I meaning RSPA, I just happened to be the medium. We were able to talk to some great folks running great businesses and bring those best practices to the membership. And that's a unique position that you, Jim, you have. And the association has. And so my lesson in that was keep learning and keep adapting.
Awesome. Yeah, the team definitely feels fortunate, like you said, to literally be in the center of it all, right? In the midst of everything going on with VARs and ISVs and vendors and distributors and PayFacs and ISOs, right? And everything coming together. The RSPA is definitely in the middle of it.
When you're doing it, when I was back in the business, running a sales organization or marketing organization, you're in the battle every day. You don't have a chance to put your head up and say, "Oh, what's everybody else doing?" You're trying to make sure that your business is successful and doing the right things for your business. You get that. You're at the top of the mountain, able to look and see what's going on, and watch all those battles and see what's working, what's not working. It's a cool position. That's what I love the most. And in my career, what I'm most proud of is what we're able to do at RSPA.
Thank you for that. Yeah, thanks for putting the industry in the position where it is today, Joe. Thanks for your time today, and I'm looking forward to seeing you at Retail Now this year.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you,
Very
Jim.
wonderful. Well, that does it for this episode of The Trusted Advisor. We hope you enjoyed our discussion. If you did, be sure to subscribe to the RSPA YouTube channel and the Trusted Advisor podcast so you never miss an episode. If you'd like to learn more best practices for VARs and ISVs in the retail technology industry, check out the RSPA blog. You can find it at gorspa.org and then clicking on RSPA blog. Again, big thanks to Joe Finizio for sharing his wisdom with us today. Thanks also to RSPA Marketing Director Chris Arnold for his production work. Joe's Joseph McDade for our music. And last but not least, thanks so much to you for listening. Our goal at the RSPA is to accelerate the success of our members in the retail technology ecosystem by providing knowledge and connections. For more information, visit our website at gorspa.org. Thanks for listening, and goodbye, everybody.